founders, all founded in FOCO, and they're all different stages of their organization. So we know they're really going to be a great encouragement for you today as you just learn and get to ask them all kinds of different questions. I've got questions listed that I'm going to be asking them. And we want to obviously keep it moving somewhat because we want to make sure everyone gets a chance to share. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce them by name, and then we'll go from there. And their stories will come out as they share today. So first of all, we have Hanna, Doreen Brown with Sound Effects Music. And then we have, and I think it'd be helpful if you guys wouldn't mind sharing your annual budget. I didn't ask you about that in advance, just so people kind of know where you're standing. Would you share, when did you start and what's your annual budget?
Yeah, we officially started programming in 2020, which was a particular year to start anything. But we and have kind of grown now to the point of that sort of 150 to 200 mark.
Okay. Cyndy, Luzinski, Dementia Together.
We started as a volunteer initiative in 2015, became a nonprofit in 2017, and our budget last year was $373,000.
Okay. And I have Jamal Skinner, Cultural Enrichment Center of Fort Collins.
We started as well in 2020. Very strange summer of 2020. We've grown. Our budget is ranging now between 150 and 200.
And Sarah Swanty, Animal Friends Alliance.
Yeah, we started in 2006, so I feel very old right now. Our budget this year is 3.8 million is our operating budget.
Excellent. So we've got some great, and again, you guys, so our first question is actually going to be about the origin story. So you guys will get to hear how each one of these founders, kind of share with you what your vision was, why you jumped into this crazy journey, and kind of got you to where you are now, just the story around that. So why don't you start, Cyndy, since you're here?
Since I'm closest to it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, as I said, we started as a volunteer initiative. Dementia Friendly Communities of Northern Colorado was our name. The reason I started the nonprofit was because my dad was diagnosed with dementia, and I learned a whole lot on our journey together, and I wanted to share that with other people here. And so we have become somewhat of an in the meantime organization. We're not focused on the cure for various causes of dementia. We're focused on in the meantime, how do people care well? Because when people care well, people living with dementia can live well. And so we provide education, life enrichment, and hope. And we do that through cultivating joy through our enrichment programming, through education that is different than most other people teach. We teach it from a different slant based on the contented dementia approach over in England. And we really do help people live well. And that's actually our vision, is that living well with dementia is the expectation, not the exception.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about, so again, we have a lot of, I don't know if do we have anyone who's not actually started their nonprofit yet in this room? Who has not started a nonprofit yet? Okay, so everyone in this room has already got an organization or already close to it. There we go. Excellent, no worries, no worries. And that's the question of, are we really a nonprofit or not? We don't make any money yet. So that's always our challenge. So why don't you just talk a little bit too, Cyndy, about the dynamic of how you came on staff, how you were able to pay yourself, then the kind of staffing that you brought on, just a little bit about that.
Yeah, when you go from a volunteer initiative, no one's getting paid. So yeah, my husband said I had it perfected. I was a no profit for quite a while.
I'm sure no one understands that in this room.
And it took the board eventually in 2019, like 2 years after we became a nonprofit, to say, Cyndy, you need to get paid. And that was a hard thing because I loved what I did and I was following my passion, and no, I don't need to be paid. And now I look back and it's like, yeah, that was actually the right move, because once I got to get paid, then it's like, oh, this does make sense. We need to actually, if we want it sustainable, now we need to bring on other staff members. So we currently have 3.5 FTEs to do what we do. And we serve, last year we served 1,630 people, one time and repeat types of services.
What about consulting?
We do one-on-one consults with.
I meant with your team.
Oh, with our team. Oh, okay. So we do
People that
one-on-one
helped you.
consults. But we contracted for grant writing, we contracted for somebody to help with our bookkeeping, for just building a board. We still contract for development, for like marketing, social media, that kind of thing. What else do we contract for? Payroll, stuff that I don't like is what we contract for.
Yeah, one by one, you've moved today.
Yeah.
I've worked with Cyndy for a number of years, so I'm kind of feeding her information because I happen to know some of the stories. But I think it's a good part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, did finance work for several years.
What was the first thing you contracted for? What's the priority?
Strategy.
Yep.
And that was a very wise investment. That's probably one of the best things we did. Because that really helps you see beyond what your real passion is.
So how big is your board?
11.
So I think we're gonna end with you. I think that'll be good to kind of finish, because you've got the capital campaign stuff and all the kind of other things you'll be able to share. So.
Okay.
All right, so Hanna.
Yeah. So our nonprofit is Sound Effects Music. So we are an arts organization, and we bring professional level music and musicians and artists into senior care spaces, isolated older adults, and any of the kind of more underserved, especially residential communities in northern Colorado. So that includes nursing homes, skilled living, skilled nursing, memory care. And that has branched off into some different areas as well. Day programming for adults, and a lot of different community partners. But the kind of impetus was when I, as a musician, wanted to be doing meaningful work. I really, had a push for a moment of saying, can I perform in this setting? This feels really good for me. This population, needs music, and what does that look like? So I spent a couple of years in 2017, 18, 19, trying to make that my full-time work as a musician, and kind of stacking up performances in Greeley, and then in Loveland, and then in Fort Collins, and kind of started down in Denver actually. But doing that work, a lot of things became clear in those settings, just how kind of underserved some of the settings can be, how isolated some of the adults can be, and how things like arts programming really go to the wayside in terms of time spent and admin and finances in facilities. And so it just became really clear that everyone involved in the equation might need support in order to get the level of social engagement and the health benefits of music into some of these spaces, which is where Sound Effects sort of came from. Was they need an external support system, they need administrative assistance, financial assistance, and the artists, the quality and the level of performers and the variety and the number of times that music is in the building can all be amplified if we're able to support our artists both financially and administratively. And so when we approached Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities, a different nonprofit, in 2019 about being an incubated program of theirs. So we kind of had this, we had sort of a slower, kind of more gradual start into being able to pilot programming and have them as a fiscal sponsor and an incubator and a mentor as we kind of got the idea off the ground before we actually went full nonprofit status for ourselves, and that was a neat progression.
Mm-hmm. So some of the questions I asked Cyndy, talk about any consulting that you've brought on, staff that you've been able to bring in, kind of what that process has been for you.
Yeah, so for us, it was interesting to both be that sort of one figure with a mind for everything that was going on, but at the same time be starting off by working and contracting with a lot of musicians. So for a little while, it was really, me with some passionate volunteer kind of service, and then, building a stable of, at the start, maybe 50 artists pretty soon, not right off the bat, So we were contracting with a lot of folks and setting up the systems to be able to contract with the arts world. And then it really wasn't until we were forming our board and going to file our 1023 that we even contracted with anyone outside of myself. And that was, I think, legal services in order to make sure that we had everything in order for 1023, and that was hugely helpful. And since then, we've added one employee, one part-time employee other than myself this year, and that was a really neat milestone to just start to build out of that one-person show model that I think a lot of us are familiar with.
Yeah. Do you utilize any other consulting for finance or board?
We do, yeah, and so since then, yeah, we have consulted for CPA services. Our board is a really neat, engaged group who also lend their services, including talent buying, professional level music talent buying, marketing, accounting, and other pieces of the puzzle. And so while we have done some consulting, we also have benefited from a lot of passionate board members too.
Mm-hmm. How big is your board?
8.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Jamal Skinner. I'm the founder and executive director of the Cultural Enrichment Center. We're located here in Fort Collins. How to tell our story? I think I'll start with the why more than what we do first. In the spring or late early summer of 2020, in the wake of the George Floyd murder, I thought I needed to do a little more in this community. I've lived off and on in Fort Collins since 1996. I'm born and raised in New York. So I've lived here a long time to see the city develop to what it is in 2022. This is a personal reason for me starting the nonprofit that I started. My mother passed in 2019. A great friend of mine's mother passed in 2020. It was within a week of the anniversary of my mother's death. We both grew up in the same neighborhood in New York. We both live in Colorado. So serendipity hits, and I drove from his house in Colorado Springs back to Fort Collins and thought that, well, I wasn't thought, I was told by these women that I needed to create a space for what our nonprofit serves, which is youth, middle school, and high school who identify with being Black and African American in Fort Collins, mainly in the Front Range, but specifically we've been serving mainly Fort Collins, a little bit of Loveland and Wellington. So I proceeded that June to create a website within 4 days of thinking of it, taking donations within the first 2 weeks. And by that September, we got our 501c3 status, became a nonprofit. We began taking donations, and I began writing for grants ever since. I know what the one person show looks like. I've pretty much took 2 weeks of no sleep, creating the mission statement, the purpose, the goal, making all the community connections I could possibly make from living here in Fort Collins for as long as I have, and writing all of our grants up until 2 weeks ago was the last grant I wrote. Our programming is based around giving first these youth a safe, brave space. Based on the demographics of Fort Collins, a lot of times these youth don't feel fully connected, whether in school or to the community. That is a reality. So I decided to create this space. We have programming that ranges from social emotional learning to fly fishing to music production, video production. We have a solar energy class, sustainable living class. We're building a solar greenhouse here in town. So we have a wide range of programming. I thought from the beginning to put all of this on the plate for them and let them sort of pick and choose the things they are wanting to connect with. Hopefully to give them an opportunity to connect more to this community and vice versa for the community to connect to them. Sometimes specific marginalized groups need this sort of thing in order to connect to a greater community. So I've been at this work since, I would say, yes, June of 2020, and like you, I finally was told that I needed to get paid. So last April was the first time I was paid to do this work. I spent a lot of my own savings to make sure this was sustainable within the first year and a half or 2 years. And that is the story of the Cultural Enrichment Center.
And so, same question, consultants, other staffing, and board size.
Okay, so board size, I originally started with 5 of us on our board. I chose right off the gate, out of the gate, I had no real knowledge of a nonprofit, how it runs. I'd been involved in growing up, I guess, in community centers similar to what I was trying to create in New York. So they were nonprofits themselves. I chose 4 people I truly trust with my life, 4 men I grew up with since I was a baby that I know would hold me accountable for anything that I was doing. Then I have added 3 board members within the last year and looking for 2 more we're looking to add after the new year in order to move somehow. Consulting, no, we haven't fully. I think actually I met with someone from your organization, Kate Reiner, and I'm planning on getting back to it. It's been a hectic summer, but I have not sought any full-on consulting. I have gone the route of trying to find others to help write grants, and I'm just very different. What I have found is most of the grant writers I have met with, besides your group, have all come to me and said, yes, I've written grants for years, and then it's me answering 95% of their questions when I know the story better than they do. So why would I pay someone to write? And we've been fortunate. We've been extremely fortunate. I think I've probably received, and it's a wild number, about 70, I think when we did the number, 73% of the grants I've written for, I've gotten. So I know the story well enough I can tell the story. But I would like to get to a point this year of handing some of that off. I think you asked employees or things like that.
Yeah, kind of the same thing.
This summer was the first time we hired a part-time worker for us. I do have volunteers who come in and work that teach the programming as well as come into our space. But we also we're after school program, we also run through the summer. So this summer got a little hectic, the 1-person show where I'm the bus driver and everything else. So I had to hire someone to sort of help me along. It was a lot to let go of some of it, but I'm
We
learning.
need to do a seminar for letting go for nonprofit and mental health. I've been a chief executive of international nonprofit. I know it well, the sleepless nights and the doing everything. So all the heroes in this room and up here. All right, Sarah, share the same.
Yeah, so much of what they have said has resonated very strongly with me. So let's see, in 2004, I was going to CSU, getting my bachelor's in zoology with my eye on veterinary school. I'd loved animals my whole life. I wanted to be a veterinarian. That's what you do if you love animals, is you become a veterinarian. And I started volunteering for another animal welfare group that was in the community at the time. And I'd been working in veterinary hospitals at that point for several years. And I was astounded to find out how many homeless animals there were in the United States and how many of those animals died in shelters every year. So in 2004, that was about 6 million dogs and cats entering shelters every year and about 3 million coming back out. So 50% of animals that entered shelters were euthanized because the pet overpopulation crisis was so bad. And being an animal lover and working in veterinary hospitals, it just blew my mind. I had no idea. And it changed my entire life because it was all I could think about was these animals that I'd loved so much. You know, my dog was my best friend as a child growing up, and just to think how many ended up in shelters unwanted every year, puppies, kittens, I mean, everything, right? Because nobody wanted them and because people were not being responsible with that privilege of having these family members. And so that was how I got started. I would lie in bed thinking about this And I couldn't sleep, and I would wake up and I would bake dog treats and till late in the night, and then I would take them to work at the vet clinic I worked at and have them, dog treats for a donation, asking our clients bringing their animals into our veterinary clinic to leave a donation for these dog treats that I had baked myself. But it was just all I could think about, and I just kept thinking, this can't be right. Nobody wants this, right? I mean, our cats and our dogs are part of our family. That's how it is for most people, and they bring us so much joy. And why is this okay? And why do more people not know about this? And at the time, in Larimer County, in particular, the situation for cats was much more dire than it was for dogs. And so the euthanasia rate in Larimer County for cats was about 60%, which meant that every 10 cats that went into the shelter, only 4 of them were going to get adopted. And so a good friend of mine and I, at this point, the organization I was volunteering for had taken in some cats, really didn't know how to care for cats, and was looking at not doing the cat thing anymore. So they were going to go to the Humane Society, and I knew what was going to happen to them if they went to the Humane Society, and it wasn't the Humane Society's fault, right? It's all these years that I've been in the business. Now I know it's a community problem, it's not a shelter problem. So I was 25 years old, and I said to my friend, do you want to start a cat rescue? And she's like, okay. And neither of us, really knew what we were doing. We had never taken a business class, and but that was the start of Fort Collins Cat Rescue. So if you're familiar with Fort Collins Cat Rescue, I co-founded Fort Collins Cat Rescue and Spay Neuter Clinic 16 years ago. And we started out in 400 square feet in a strip mall on Mulberry and Timberline, where we still exist to some capacity. And it was an unpaid volunteer gig for quite a while that we did this. And pretty quickly we realized 2 things. 1, we had a huge problem in our community, which we kind of already knew. And 2, there were a lot of people like us that wanted it to change. And so about 6 months into our journey, starting the cat rescue, we opened the first low-cost spay neuter clinic in our community, because really the root of the problem was that people could not afford to get their cats spayed and neutered. And that was really what started moving the needle on the animal welfare issue in our community, was opening the first low-cost spay neuter clinic, subsidized, if you will, grants and donations help pay for that, and really focusing on at-risk animals, so animals living in communities with fewer resources, feral cats, outdoor cats that don't really have an owner, focusing on those populations. And our clinic served dogs as well. And as we continued to move on, we continued to really put a lot of effort into adding programs that helped stop pet overpopulation versus trying to get more animals into our shelter and adopted out. So we expanded our clinics to start offering low-cost vaccination clinics along with other preventative measures. We opened a pet food pantry that we feed over 1,000 animals out of every year. We started a community cat program where we TNR over 1,000 animals every year. And then the most recent thing, which some of you may be aware of, is in 2020, the Cat Rescue merged with Animal House Rescue and Grooming and became Animal Friends Alliance. So actually went through a merger right before the pandemic. It was really great timing. So at this point, scale-wise, we have 60 staff members. We help 13,000 animals a year through our various programs. A lot of people are always really interested in the sheltering and adoptions part. That's about 3,600 adoptions we do every year, dogs and cats. And we have 900 volunteers, approximately. There's always that kind of flow as people come and go. And I mentioned our budget's $3.8 million. Next year it will be a little over $4 million. We're getting ready to finish our new shelter. So we launched a capital campaign also in 2020 during the pandemic to expand our animal shelter at our Taft Hill campus. We've got a 5-acre property on North Taft Hill Road that housed where Animal House's dog shelter was prior to the merger. And what we're doing is we've added about 8,000 square feet to that property of shelter space. We're moving our cats from Mulberry and Timberline to there. But we're maintaining both campuses, so we're gonna have a sheltering and adoptions campus and a community pet resources. So our community pet resources will continue to offer our community veterinary services that are subsidized low cost, our pet food pantry, and our community cat program. And then folks that are looking to add a cat or dog to their family or having to relinquish for some reason would be visiting our tactile campus. So that's actually coming up very quickly. We're moving into our new building probably the week of Thanksgiving. And that was a $2.8 million capital campaign, and we were able to fully fund that capital campaign.
Wow.
Which is yeah, board of directors, we have 12 board members. Julie's one of them. I think we have 12 currently. Consultants, gosh, I was thinking about this. We haven't used a lot. We've been incredibly fortunate in having a lot of community members over the years provide those types of services for free. We did used to contract out our payroll and our audit bookkeeping. Well, to a degree, I did a lot of the bookkeeping early on, and that CPA helped us get our 501c3 status at no charge. So she did all the paperwork, and we got our 501c3 status in 2007. We've hired Art Bavoso a few times. So if you saw Art, if you got to listen to Art speak earlier, I met him probably in 2008 maybe, and just immediately just loved his energy and the wisdom that he brought. And so a few times over the years, we've hired him to help with training our board on how to fundraise and what's the role of a board member in a nonprofit organization. And actually when Allie Eccleston, who was a co-founder of Animal House, and I first started talking about merging, Art was one of the very first people I reached out to, and we ended up hiring Art to help us consult through that the beginning process of a capital campaign, and even just figuring out whether the merger was a good idea for our two organizations or not. Yeah, so we've seen some incredible things happen. When I started the cat rescue, like I mentioned, the euthanasia rate for cats was really bad, and it wasn't great for dogs either. And that's changed dramatically in our community. There are very few homeless dogs in our community. Most of the dogs that you would see at Larimer Humane Society or Animal Friends Alliance come from other states, actually. Most of our dogs transfer in from Texas, California, Kansas, Nebraska. People in Northern Colorado love their dogs. We're very educated pet owners. They're part of our family. So that's been an amazing transition to see. And quite a lot of our kittens these days come from other shelters where they would be euthanized. When I started the cat rescue, we had a waiting list of people wanting to surrender litters of kittens because their cat had a litter and it was their fourth litter. And by now you've given every family member and every friend at least one kitten, and we're out of places to get rid of these kittens. And again, those low-cost spay-neuter services just made such a difference. But we used to have kittens abandoned on our doorstep at the cat rescue. I'd show up for work in the morning and, oh good, there's a cat carrier full of kittens on the mailbox. So we don't really see that anymore. Most of the local kittens that come into our shelter are ones we've gone out and trapped through our community cat program. So incredible things that are happening in Northern Colorado. We've really become something for other communities to strive to when it comes to the pet overpopulation crisis, because we've done an amazing job, and we have quite a few animal welfare organizations that work fantastically together, have really strong partnerships, and are trying to really, everyone's using their strengths, as they best can. We're being careful not to duplicate services and those sorts of things. So we have a great relationship with Larimer Humane Society. We work pretty closely with Northern Colorado Friends of Ferals. So, but it's been a journey. It's been a 16-year-long journey for sure to get to this point. Yeah.
I hope you all are feeling encouraged by each of these stories and before they started. So now the question is, we like to talk about additional successes. So we'll start with Cyndy again. We heard from her. Tell us about one of your biggest breakthroughs. It could be program, it could be finances, it could be staffing, it could be just something that was really critical in moving you to a different space in the organization.
I think our biggest breakthrough was the very beginning of the pandemic, in that we were very quick to do our pivot from online education, online enrichment programming from in-person to online. And at the same time, then we took the name Dementia Friendly Communities of Northern Colorado. And we talked to our people who said, you need to rename your organization, it's way too long. And they chose what the name would be. And they said, what you do is you walk with us through this journey. Dementia Together needs to be the name. And we kind of, we're a little bit resistant, and even to change the logo, but that was the best thing we could have done. It really just helped us be really clear on our messaging, and that our mission stayed the same, that no one has to walk the dementia journey alone. So pretty much everything we do, if it's not helping people not walk that journey alone, we're not gonna do it. So we're not all things to all people. We're like, okay, this helps the people living with dementia live well, the care partners care well, the professionals be more satisfied with their roles, that they can learn real simple strategies, then we'll do it. But if not, we don't. So I think our clarifying our messaging during the pandemic and changing our name and our logo, I think that was the best thing we could have done.
You said that you were doing more in person. Has that changed since the pandemic?
So now we're back doing in person, but we had to keep the online stuff because with dementia too, as life needs to simplify, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, we still can come to memory cafes. Now we just come online weekly. We used to just do them in person monthly. Now we do monthly in person and our weekly online support group, education, and life enrichment. So we're doing both now, which is again causing us to surely need more resources to meet the need. And the need is out there, and that's part of the frustration, is like, oh, we can't even begin to touch the need as we see it growing. And I think the challenge is avoid mission drift, stick with what you do and do it well, and then not despise small beginnings. That you can celebrate the little victories too.
I think all nonprofits do struggle with that. Who are we and what do we do? It takes a while to figure that out. So. Jamal, why don't you answer next?
Small victories? Is that what we're
Biggest breakthroughs.
I'm joking.
Okay.
We're gonna be here all day.
Kind of again, the biggest shift, I know. So I think again, what our audience wants to hear is, kind of what was something that was a significant shift that just kind of opened things up for you?
I've got it. I was
Just teasing.
joke, yeah. Two things. One, when we started to kind of piggyback off that about the virtual thing. We started in the midst of the pandemic. So that fall of the school year, I'm sure if you have children or know people that have had children, it was difficult. So we came into things where it was a small space to begin with. My vision was initially based on the pandemic that we could only serve 10 youth and keep things kind of safe after school. So we were in a small space. It was maybe about, with all the small rooms, cut up into their pieces, maybe about 1,100 square feet. Really main area, maybe 250 to 300 square feet where we could convene. And we began to grow. I was watching the growth of taking on more students, just accepting applications, not wanting to turn any kid away. We got to a point last, I would say Christmas break, where I was, again, the sleepless nights thinking we needed to move. I could see it on the kids' faces, and it was stressful to me because I was like, my goodness, commercial real estate in Fort Collins is not kind. It's definitely not kind to nonprofits, unfortunately. Hopefully something we can change in the future. But for me, that was a big move for us, and it was finding a new space. So we moved from Linden Street downtown, which was an awesome place to be. We moved to Midtown, which also opened us up to I didn't realize it until I heard from other parents who fill out applications that because we were so far away from the south side of town, it opened us up to the possibility of more participants. This also led back again to a problem last summer was transportation. There was a lot of single mothers, a lot of people who work till 5, 6 o'clock, can't necessarily get their kids to the program after school. So our second biggest thing was finding a a way to purchase transportation for the kids, which I, again, was the bus driver after school every day last year. So those two things have definitely opened up a lot more possibilities. They were great accomplishments. It seems like something small, but they were great accomplishments because I know even just the transportation during the school year and the summer, how much it helped. And it wasn't me, it's not me saying that, it is the actual parents and caregivers who said that. And having a bigger space, we're now in approximately about 3,300 square feet. So now we can bring in more of the community into our space and provide other programs that connect, which is what we've been doing.
Where are you guys located in Midtown?
We're right in kind of, where the car toys area is, in Midtown there.
Okay.
Do you have volunteers that come and help with like the after-school programs?
I do. So
And then what's the vetting? Because I might have a couple of friends that
the vetting process for volunteers,
Yeah.
we do a background check. I personally meet every volunteer, and we obviously do a background check before anyone comes into the space. But mainly it's just having bodies. Really, summertime, it's more about having bodies because I had at the max 32 kids this past summer. So it's a lot. But after school, we're about 15 to 18 kids. But yeah, there's an application on our website for volunteers as well.
What I'd like to do is move forward and then take some more questions at the end as we get there. So thanks, Marie. I know we've got lots of questions for all of our, and of course, all of our presenters can be available. Hopefully you guys will write your emails up there or something too. So I think what I love about Jamal's story is they talking about physical space. It's that risk when you're looking at your budget. What do? Do you hire somebody? Do you pay a consultant? Do you expand your space? And for Jamal's organization, it's that risk. And the reality is that we know it's a whole nother seminar in itself about finance and nonprofits. But the reality is most of us start the year with a stretched budget. If you're not having a stretched budget, you're not going to grow. And I have seen in my years of being a chief executive, my years of consulting, how it just seems to work out, doesn't it? It's frightening half the time. I had a lot of sleepless nights, but somehow it seems to work out, that stretch. I jokingly say, with Cyndy, she's like, no, we have to balance it. No, Cyndy, we don't. But I think that's where I love about it's a great opportunity to talk about what that
And
is.
it was, and just for 10 seconds, that is really where I was at. It was fear of moving forward based on, are we going to find money to make sure we can be sustained in this place? If we sign a lease, I know it's going to be anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Can we do it? And I would just suggest to anyone, I think once I got over that hump of the fear, it took me about a week. I didn't have any doubt that it would work. And of course, there was a lot of other things involved. I mean, I found a space that I worked the deal that I would do more of the renovation in the space. So again, putting in a nice floor, everything is what it takes. But it's worked. And now I'm really excited that I didn't stop myself from doing it.
Yeah, you got the space you need, at least for now. We're be excited to hear you next year talking about the bigger space you've had to get because of
Hopefully, yeah.
That's a good transition. Let's go to Sarah then next and just share the same thing, but your biggest shift in the organization for you.
Yeah, definitely the merger in 2020. So we started, Allie and I started talking about that in 2018. Allie was looking at moving on from Animal House, and they were going to be looking to hire a new executive director. And we got together and talked. We had a lot of similar philosophies. We had a lot of overlap in volunteers, some staff overlap. We were about the same age organization-wise. And we realized that we were paying for a lot of the same things. And that wasn't necessary if it was a good match for us to merge, right? You're paying for 2 executive directors, you're paying for 2 bookkeepers, you're paying to file 2 990s every year, you're paying for all these different memberships. So we're both doing that and spending all this money. And we realized that if we came together, that money could be going towards growing our programs, better compensating our staff members, and ultimately helping more animals. And not only that, the other, the fundraising piece, we're asking the same businesses to sponsor our events every year. We were asking the same people to come to our events every year. And we just thought, wow, what if we merge and And our events have more people in attendance, but our overhead just shrunk because it's the same event and we can raise more money. And so we spent a year and a half, the two of us and our two boards, working on this idea and ultimately deciding to merge. And there were very difficult moments during this process. There were people that didn't want us to merge. There were cat people, there were dog people, they did not get along. There were bird people that didn't want the cats with the dog. I mean, it was like, whew. There were people that were very married to Fort Collins Cat Rescue, were very married to Animal House personally, had been with the organization for a long time, and they didn't like this transition necessarily, a new name, new branding. It was very personal to them. We worked through it though, and Allie and I think our board members believed the whole time, we're gonna help more animals. If we do this, it's gonna be hard, and we are going to lose some people along the way, but we are going to help more animals, and that is why we're here. And we really held firm to that, even though I will not lie, there were a couple times where I thought, oh, this is the worst idea I've had yet. And we stuck through it. And what was amazing is, despite the pandemic hitting and other challenges, that has happened. We have helped more animals. Animal House in 2019 was on track to do about 650 dog adoptions. And in 2020, we adopted out over 1,000 dogs. So by bringing our resources together, which included the people, the money, the assets, we did it. We helped more cats through our community cat program in 2020 than we'd ever helped before. And we saw that again last year in 2021. We surpassed our dog adoption numbers again. We surpassed the number of cats helped through our community cat program again. So that was definitely the biggest breakthrough. Our fundraising events have been amazing. We've had so many people rally for Animal Friends Alliance and the mission and vision and what we're trying to do. And so, yeah, huge breakthrough. And it was really scary. A lot of times it was, and you have to work through that fear. And if you truly believe, this is the next step to do more, to help more, to touch more lives, you'll be surprised at what will happen. Yeah, so.
All right, Hanna, let's have you answer the same question.
Yeah, I think our biggest breakthrough, I would say, kind of came in the form of, sometime last year in 2021, after sort of navigating our startup in 2020, I feel like there was kind of a moment where, for us, a lot of our participants are, our three kind of core participants are the residents in facilities, the musicians we work with, and then the facilities themselves and the sort of staff and networks that support the residents. And I think that there was kind of a moment last year where instead of drawing from all of the relationships that we kind of started out with and our sort of pilot version of things, there was kind of a moment where there kind of became ownership of the program outside of us, a little bit, because there were facilities reaching out to us suddenly because they had heard of us, and musicians reaching out to us instead of kind of always the other way around. And I think that was a really big turning point because it helped me to focus in on that sort of community ownership element again that I think, often rightly so, funders kind of focus in on like, who are your constituents and what do they want? Okay, we hear what you want and why you started, but like, are you listening to the people that you're trying to serve? And where do they come into the puzzle? And so I think being able to open up to that moment where there were people that we didn't know who were coming to us and trying to find out how sound effects could be in their facility, how they could participate, and seeing why they wanted to do that, I think was something that's continued to shape our programs now in a major way.
Okay, so here's always an important question to ask anyone you're looking for mentorship from. What is one of your biggest mistakes? If someone says, oh, I haven't made any, well, we know we've all been in the journey long enough there, but let's start with Hanna this time, even though you just talked.
Sure. Yeah, I think this was a pretty isolated incident and kind of a small one in some ways, but it was a huge learning and humbling moment for me. I think, going into the world and really wanting to work meaningfully and build really trusting relationships with facilities and artists and connect people and all of that, really warm-hearted feelings, there was one instance where we started to contract with a musician who didn't live in Colorado, who really had, ultimately looking back, I think some really red flags in terms of just starting to working with a stranger and not drawing from that pool of people that we knew. And, I think in any business at all, this is kind of that balance of, how do you set up your systems to allow for bringing people in, and then also to keep up your quality control and all of these elements. So we had this moment that kind of snowballed with a certain artist who, ended up kind of teaching me a lot of lessons in this moment. So involving, how to kind of manage our finances in a way that we have everything in order, and that we are also being able to try our artists out in front of folks before committing to full-on long relationships with artists or connecting them with each other. And it really kind of ended up in this, again, humbling sort of messy place where I was luckily able to work with our board member who is a professional talent buyer and start to learn. It was nice in that moment to reach out and be like, oh, right, this is why these systems are in place. This is why, you do these things before you work with someone. And here's how to navigate really difficult personal situations that might arise. So, that was actually a huge piece for me in terms of deciding how we move forward with integrity and who we are working with.
And that's the dynamic of management, managing staff, managing volunteers. How do you release them? Board members, all of that. That's a whole great conversation there. Cyndy, just sure.
I think one of my many mistakes was not trusting my gut in terms of our vision was, if we're walking alongside people living with dementia, we need to do it in a way that it doesn't cost them anything. They're not gonna worry about calling us if they can't, what if I can't afford consultation or education or coming to these events. And we trialed charging for classes at one point, and it felt so awful initially, and I was like, why am I listening to somebody telling me, well, they're not gonna find value in it unless they have to pay a little bit. And I think that is not true. People do find value in things that they don't have to pay for, knowing that someone else is gonna pay for them, either through grants or private donations or corporate sponsorships. And so I made that mistake recently again with a new contracted worker who was trying to help us get more corporate sponsorships for our work. They have great ideas, they're being helpful, they just didn't quite know our people. And our idea that we never ever want cost to be a barrier to finding connection and support, period. Even for the professionals. And so when anybody asks us to do any kind of education, we're like, yeah, we're there. And then they find value, and then they want to be a sponsor corporately. But I tried to follow, well, let's try these new guidelines with one organization, and it was that same thing. I didn't pay attention to my own gut reaction of, no, offer it and then see if they want to be a sponsor. And so I was like, well, here's our corporate sponsorship packet. Well, duh. I mean, to them, they don't know what we teach and how it's different and how it makes a difference for your staff and all of that. And I think I don't know if I burned bridges, but I think I offended somebody, and surely didn't mean to, and I don't think we gave them the service and the value that we can give them because I put, let's create a corporate sponsorship relationship versus let me show you what value we add to you first before I'd ever even ask you to be a corporate sponsor. So that's a more recent good lesson to learn. And to stick with, man, if your values are you never want cost to be a barrier to finding support, then that's for everybody who comes to you. So that's
Sarah.
I have two, but I'll be quick.
Okay.
I would say that my first one was when I started the cat rescue all those years ago with a friend, and I was much younger and inexperienced. I was coming from a place of judgment in running my organization, and there's no space for that when you're running a nonprofit. So I had a lot of anger about people that were relinquishing their animals, people that didn't get their pets spayed or neutered, the shelter that was euthanizing animals. And now that I've done this for so many years and had so many more experiences, you realize that you can't judge anyone. You don't know what anyone's story is or what anyone is going through, and you will never successfully be able to help provide resources, move the needle, make a difference if you're judging other people. So that was one of my biggest takeaways, and I have some stories, specific stories of that I'm not gonna share right now, but if anyone wants to hear. And then I would say that the other one is, and I think a lot of leaders struggle with this initially, is making the mistake of trying to be the best at everything. And what did you call it? Not letting go. Trusting other people to be a part of it and to bring value. And it is okay if other people are better at things than you are. And that was something I had to learn. I wanted to be the best at everything, right? Well, in the organization. And as I started to let go and go, they are better at this than me, and I'm gonna let them do it. My God, I became a better leader, and we became a stronger organization, and I earned more trust. So those would be my two biggest mistakes early on in my leadership, having to learn those things.
I had a fantastic boss in my early 20s, and he taught me that, and I've used it throughout my whole career, is that when you delegate, sometimes people will do it better than you, sometimes they won't. Often they will almost always do it differently than you, and that's okay. And I think that is a hard thing for all of us as leaders to realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't bring the right person in, and something does fall through the cracks, but
That's
most of
okay.
it's not true. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jamal.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. My mistakes were from the beginning, and I didn't realize it until, fully connect to it until I would say about a year in to a year and a half. Because we started as a nonprofit in the fall on paper and went through that fiscal year into another year. So it's finances. Finding an accountant early, if I would have had one early, would have definitely stopped me from losing my mind as far as trying to handle all of the finances myself. Our first full year. So I would say that was definitely my biggest mistake. It's been a blessing to have someone handling that where we meet, twice a month sometimes. And then hiring someone early summer to do the admin work, to also connect with the accountant. So that taking all of that off my plate I was able to breathe, really breathe this summer. And actually, the first time I took a vacation in 2.5 years. So it was definitely well needed. But I would say that those two things, if you can afford it or find someone, and I have someone who's very affordable, if anyone's looking, to find that first, because as you're saying, trying to think I have no problem with relinquishing things. Humility I'm all about it. Please take this off my plate. So I've been giving a lot away.
We need you to teach the seminar on.
I was protective of certain things, but not that I felt like I could do it better than someone else. That's why I run one program in the nonprofit. But finding someone you trust to handle your finances is huge. Because getting your budget and keeping those things in order is crucial for writing for grants and everything moving forward.
So I do have 2 more questions, and we only have 4 minutes left. So I'm gonna ask you guys just to answer quickly in that. So what funding source most fueled your growth? Was there something specific that you did that made a change? And Hanna, why don't you start?
Yeah, I would say grant funding for us, absolutely, because it's neat that we have kind of an earned income source by any contributions that the facilities can make toward our programs. And that gives us a little bit of a flexibility and some diverse funding, but being able to plug those grant funds in the moment where I went from no's to yeses in the grant area was, I think, absolutely central and crucial to gaining flexibility and being able to afford administrative elements of our programs.
All right, Sarah.
We are fortunate in that we have some service fees, like our clinic, all the low cost and free programs, some of it is paid for, but I'll stick mostly to the fundraising side. And I would say when we were smaller, really focusing on growing that monthly giving program. A small amount that people can give every single month, and when you get enough people giving that void, that will pay for a lot of your operations. And that's something that, though now we have more fundraisers and we get larger grants and we are starting to receive planned gifts, that monthly giving program, we've got several hundred people that are a part of that. That makes a big difference, and most people can give $5, $10 a month.
I'm gonna echo that.
Yes.
We started first, that was our way of, my goal was if I can get 1,000 people in City of Fort Collins to just give $5 a month, we would at that time be able to pay our rent, bills, whatever, just those basic things. So finding those continued monthly donors is huge. We didn't reach the 1,000 mark yet, but then moving on to the grants and finding specific, if you have a very focused program or whatever organization you're doing, really doing the research for months and finding those grants that are focused in that area, even if it's something that you missed that year, to make sure you go back and get it the following year and really to chase it. And for us, that was the second. This last bit has been family foundations that I've been searching out and found a couple too last year that at least will sustain us. They're going to give for 4 to 6 years. So you know that money is guaranteed to be there every year. So that takes a heck of a weight off, so.
All right, Cyndy.
We were initially mostly funded with grants, but as individual families have been involved with us now, it's the individual donors that are our biggest support.
Okay. And our last question for our panel here. So again, we'll answer this one quickly. Looking back, what would be the one thing you can tell the dreamers out here about the journey? Whatever you would want to share with them. So Jamal, why don't you start?
I'll be quick. Don't have any doubt and don't fear. That's it. Really, I think that's it.
All right, Hanna.
Yeah, I'll rapid fire do 2. One being, I think, leaning into the really fun elements of getting to wear so many hats and learn so many new things in the process of starting something like this is actually like a real joy. And then also that, to echo what we said before, that asking people who know how to do what you think will serve your mission and getting to share that with other folks, and that is probably the second thing.
All right, Sarah.
I will say something I tell my staff all the time because they're full of big, great ideas, and I tell them, shoot for the moon, but do it in baby steps.
All right, Cyndy.
Really?
Stop with Cyndy.
I'm big into mantras, so there's a few that come to mind. One is to make your passion your purpose. You need to make excellence your standard. And it doesn't always mean that you have to be the best in the world. And so we talk about, but let's be our best for the world. And that's the most we can do. And then there's a guy named Frederick Buechner who died last month, but he talks about your calling is where your greatest passion meets the world's, where your deepest passion meets the world's greatest need. And that's your calling. And when I think about the word passion, the idea that comes to mind for me is that it actually comes from the Latin word that means to suffer. So I think if you're gonna follow your passion, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to suffer for?
That is a fantastic way to end. I don't know. If you guys have been here when I was talking about how to start a nonprofit, that's a thing. And not all of us are all a little bit weird, don't you think? Nonprofit people are weird people, but obviously I'm one of you. I love to be around all the nonprofits I do. So anyway, but there's certainly what drives us, what makes us do these crazy things that we do.